peaceful kingdom of Belarus, where rivers sparkled like silver ribbons and gardens bloomed throughout the year, there lived a poor girl named Alina. She was known across the town for selling the freshest flowers in the market square. Every morning before sunrise, Alina walked through the dew-covered fields, carrying a little wicker basket filled with roses, lilies, jasmine, and tulips. Although she lived in a tiny cottage near the edge of the forest with her sick grandmother, Alina never complained. She believed that kindness was richer than gold. Flowers are like hope, her grandmother often said. Even the smallest one can brighten the darkest heart. Alina remembered those words every day. The kingdom of Belarus was ruled by King Adrian, who had one son, Prince Lucian. The prince was handsome and intelligent, but he rarely smiled. Since the death of the queen many years earlier, the royal palace had become silent and cold. Musicians played cheerful tunes. Servants decorated the halls with expensive treasures, and royal cooks prepared grand feasts, yet nothing pleased the prince. Meanwhile, the people of Belarus struggled because Lord Marcus, the king's greedy advisor, collected heavy taxes from poor villagers. Farmers lost their crops, shopkeepers closed their stores, and many families went hungry. One bright spring morning, Alina arranged her flowers carefully at the marketplace. Children gathered around her stall because she always gave them tiny wildflowers for free. Suddenly, royal guards marched through the street. "Make way for Prince Lucian," shouted one guard. The crowd bowed respectfully as the prince rode past on his white horse. His royal cloak shimmered in the sunlight, but his face looked distant and unhappy. As the prince passed Alina's stall, a soft wind carried the fragrance of jasmine toward him. He turned his head for the first time that morning. "What flower is that?" he asked quietly. Alina stepped forward nervously. "It is jasmine, Your Highness," she replied. "Its fragrance brings peace to troubled hearts." The prince looked surprised. Most people around him spoke with fear, but the flower girl spoke gently and honestly. "And do you believe flowers can heal sorrow?" he asked. Alina smiled. "Not completely, sir, but they remind people that beauty still exists in the world." For the first time in many months, Prince Lucian smiled faintly. "I shall buy all your flowers," he said. The townspeople whispered in amazement. From that day onward, the prince secretly visited the marketplace every week. Instead of sending servants, he came himself to speak with Alina. She told him stories about ordinary villagers, hard-working farmers, laughing children, and lonely old people. Gradually, the prince began to understand the suffering hidden behind the palace walls. One afternoon, while arranging roses, Alina looked deeply worried. "What troubles you today?" she asked. Lucian sighed. "My father wishes me to marry Princess Celestine from the neighboring kingdom. The marriage will increase our wealth and power." "Then why are you unhappy?" asked Alina. "Because she cares only for jewels and luxury," he answered. "She has never spoken kindly to a poor person." Alina lowered her eyes. "A prince must do what is best for the kingdom." "But what if the kingdom needs compassion more than wealth?" Lucian replied. Before Alina could answer, dark clouds gathered above the market. A heavy storm began suddenly, and frightened people rushed away. Alina struggled to protect her flowers from the rain. The prince quickly removed his royal cloak and held it above the baskets. "You will be soaked, Your Highness," Alina cried. "Then we shall both be soaked together," Lucian laughed. The two shared laughter beneath the storm, while thunder echoed across the sky. However, Hidden watched them carefully. "This poor flower girl is becoming dangerous," he muttered. "If the prince listens to common people, my power will disappear." The next day, Lord Marcus visited the king. "Your Majesty," he said dramatically, "the prince spends his time with a mere flower seller. The people are gossiping. Such behavior dishonors the royal family." King Adrian frowned. "Is this true?" "I saw it myself," Marcus replied. "That girl is surely trying to trap the prince." The king became furious. "Bring the prince to me at once." When Prince Lucian entered the royal chamber, the king's voice thundered across the hall. "You will stop seeing that flower girl immediately." Lucian remained calm. "Father, Elena is kind, wise, and honest." "She is poor," shouted the king. "A future king cannot marry a commoner." "She understands the people better than anyone in this palace," Lucian answered firmly. King Adrian slammed his hand upon the throne. "You will marry Princess Celestine. This discussion is over." Heartbroken, Lucian left the chamber. Meanwhile, Lord Marcus secretly ordered guards to drive Elena away from the city. That evening, soldiers arrived at her cottage. "By order of the king, you must leave Belarus before sunrise," announced the captain. Elena's grandmother began coughing weakly. "But where shall we go?" Elena asked. "That is not our concern," replied the guard. Elena packed her few belongings silently. Before dawn, she placed one final basket of flowers outside the palace gate with a note. The note read, "True flowers bloom, even after storms. Farewell, Your Highness." When Lucian discovered the basket, he immediately rode to the marketplace. "Elena," he called desperately. But she was gone. Days passed, and the prince became colder than ever before. He refused grand parties and ignored royal celebrations. Even Princess Celestine grew annoyed. At the same time, Belarus faced terrible hardship. A long drought dried the rivers, crops failed, and hunger spread throughout the land. Villagers prayed for rain, but none came. One evening, an old traveler arrived at the palace gates. "I bring news," he said. "Beyond the silver forest lives a girl who grows flowers even during drought. Wherever she walks, hope returns." Prince Lucian immediately knew who it was. Without delay, he mounted his horse and journeyed toward the silver forest. After many hours, he discovered a small village surrounded by blooming gardens. Children laughed beside fountains, and colorful flowers covered every corner. In the center of the village stood Elena. She looked surprised as the prince approached. "Your Highness?" Lucian stepped down from his horse. "I searched everywhere for you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You should not have come." "I should have come sooner," he replied. The villagers welcomed the prince. Panic filled the streets. "We must leave," cried someone. But Elena shook her head. "If the fire reaches the dry fields, the entire valley will burn." Without hesitation, she organized the villagers. "Bring buckets from the wells. Dig trenches near the gardens. Cover the children with wet blankets." Prince Lucian worked beside her throughout the night. Although smoke filled the air and sparks flew everywhere, Elena remained brave. Finally, heavy rain began pouring from the sky. The villagers cheered with relief as the fire slowly died. An old woman looked at Elena with wonder. "You brought courage when everyone else was afraid." The next morning, King Adrian himself arrived with royal soldiers. He had followed the prince after hearing about the fire. When the king saw the burned hills, exhausted villagers, and Elena caring for injured children, shame filled his heart. Lord Marcus had described her as selfish and manipulative, yet she had risked her life. The king approached Elena slowly. "I judged you unfairly," he admitted. "You possess more nobility than many people born in palaces." Elena bowed respectfully. "I only did what was necessary, Your Majesty." At that moment, several villagers stepped forward. "This young woman saved us," said one farmer. "She shared her food when we had none," added another. "She gave us hope," said a child. King Adrian turned toward his son. "Lucian," he said quietly, "perhaps a true queen is not measured by wealth, but by the kindness within her heart." The prince smiled. Mother once told me the same thing. Soon afterward, Lord Marcus's corruption was exposed. The villagers revealed how he had stolen taxes and mistreated poor families. The king removed him from power immediately. Months later, Bellerose celebrated the grand wedding of Prince Lucien and Elena. Unlike royal weddings filled only with nobles, this celebration welcomed everyone. Farmers danced beside merchants, children tossed flower petals through the streets, and musicians played joyful songs late into the evening. Elena wore a simple gown decorated with jasmine flowers. "You look more beautiful than the palace gardens," Lucien whispered. Elena laughed gently. "And you finally learned how to smile, Your Highness." After becoming queen, Elena transformed Bellerose. She built schools for poor children, opened hospitals for the sick, and planted public gardens throughout the kingdom. Whenever people asked how a flower seller became a queen, King Lucien would answer proudly. Farmers danced beside merchants, children tossed flower petals through the streets, and musicians played joyful songs late into the evening. Elena wore a simple gown decorated with jasmine flowers. "You look more beautiful than the palace gardens," Lucien whispered. Elena laughed gently. "And you finally learned how to smile, Your Highness." After becoming queen, Elena transformed Bellerose. She built schools for poor children, opened hospitals for the sick, and planted public gardens throughout the kingdom. Whenever people asked how a flower seller became a queen, King Lucien would answer proudly. She did not become royal because she married a prince. She was royal because of her kindness long before she entered the palace. Years later, the kingdom of Bellerose became famous as the land of flowers and hope. And in the center of the royal garden stood a golden statue of a young girl holding a basket of jasmine, reminding future generations that even the humblest heart can change an entire kingdom. True nobility comes from kindness, courage, and compassion, not from wealth or social status.